So what this is also doing, right, is this is now also sealing any excess glue that I got onto Rosie's skin, which you can actually kind of see quite clearly. So that's now, that should be not sticky at all. So yeah, but obviously it shows, right? It shows up quite a lot, and it's quite dark. So then this is the blue liquid. Right. So this is this final seal that I was talking about, right? Which most people just spritz straight on as a sealer, right? As a sealer, but I kind of use it as a wipe. So it's just less. It's kind of like alcohol, but less. So just go over the whole thing now. So I haven't spritzed it on, right? I'm just kind of using it as a wipe. And it kind of gets rid of all the excess powder, seals the glue. So now this is kind of like glued on, there's glue on the skin, the glue is set with powder, right? And then the excess powder is kind of wiped with this final seal. And I've got this nice kind of translucent see-through thing that essentially will all take paint in the same way now as well, because it's got that layer of final seal over it.
Can I do you close up?
Yeah, do.
Thank you. Okay, I'm holding that.
Any questions? Come on.
Do you use any like flock in your
Yes,
piece
yes.
to colour it?
Absolutely,
Cool.
yes. Good question. Yeah, good question. So, yes, I do, right?
Okay.
Yeah, definitely use flock. I think if you're just gonna, well, again, I'm really super neurotic, so I've got to go all the way. So I use 7 different colours of flock, right? Not just one.
In that piece as well.
Not just one. Yeah, so I basically 2 reds, 2 blues, an olive green, an ochre yellow, and then depends on what skin tone, I'll put in like a pale pink and a taupe kind of thing for very pale skin. I've got browns and deeper reds and purples that I put in for black skin, etc., etc. Yeah, so this is a product I just developed, and it's in the shops now, Tilt. So this is my kind of pre-coloured silicone sachets, right? And if you want to pass that around, you'll see, yes, all the flock that's in there.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So have you used flock in this piece as well?
Yes, probably not that much. The point is, in a way, that if you do your flock well, you don't see it.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to see, oh, flock. You know?
Yeah.
And again, if you use too much of it, flock in itself, even though it's tiny, it's nylon, so it's very stiff. So if you imagine if you load a silicone silica with tons of flock, it's going to make the piece really stiff.
Right.
Yeah. So there's a limit to how much you really want to use.
Yeah.
Plus another thing is if you've got a lot of flock, that kind of thickens your material, and that flock gets stuck in your edges.
Okay.
Especially if you're pouring it into a closed mold. Sometimes, like the pressure, that contact point in the mold almost acts like a filter. So you're squeezing in, and all that flock gets caught in the edge, and your excess silicone comes out. So then you end up with these really weird flock collection patterns and stuff like that.
Okay.
So yeah, use sparingly, but totally. Go for it, play with it, yeah. And again, like, you know, certainly for not prosthetics because it's limited, right? Again, it makes it stiff. But if you're making dummy heads or puppets or display heads, then you can really chuck tons of flock into it, and it almost looks painted fresh out of the mold. It almost looks. Then you just have to add a little bit of paint in there to really bring it out. But yes, lots of flock is very good. I love it.
Do you have any advice on how to get cut plastic on your pieces without tearing from fiberglass molds?
Don't use fiberglass molds. Don't use fiberglass molds. You know, the texture, the surface quality texture of your mold is going to be very important. what I mean? So if you are trying, make sure that your cores, for example, are really smooth. That will help. So if you've got a core that's got loads of rough skin texture and tool marks or whatnot, whatever, then that's even more surface area and texture for that cat plastic to want to grab onto. You know what I mean? So if you make sure that your cores polished smooth, right? And I polish my cores. Polish them.
What do you use for your cores?
2000 grit sandpaper.
As in like
As
the
in-
material?
Yeah. I go all the way grade. So depends, again, every core is different, right? So yes, I'll use fiberglass for some,
Right.
but very rarely. I'll never cast a functioning bit of cat plastic from fiberglass. If I'm using fiberglass, it's to make a jacket.
Yeah.
So then my piece is coming out of a silicon negative. Then no problem. Then you use fiberglass all to your heart's content, right? But using polyester as a functioning prosthetic mold is not a good idea, especially if you're spraying acetone, right? Because acetone eats polyester. So each time you spray cat plastic into that mold, you're weakening the surface and making it even harder to get the next pull out of it, right? So, and then the same goes with polyurethane, do you know what I mean? It's complicated. Good release agents, sealing stuff really well is good. I mean, I don't know what release agents you're using, but using liquid wax on fiberglass to then spray cat plastic onto, it's not a good idea because the solvents in that cat plastic are going to eat right past that wax, right? Because the solvent in the wax is way softer than the acetone, right, or the IPA. So it's just going to go bypass right past that and bite into the polyester, right? So if you're using zinc stearate, the white stuff, right, that's more like a soap that you brush in and you let it dry and then you flake it out. It leaves you with a mold surface that looks a bit shiny and powdery and not very pretty, but that's probably the best release for spraying cat plastic out of a rigid mold.
Okay, that's excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, zinc stearate.
We use the pest release and obviously matte wax and
Yeah, I mean, my recommendation would be zinc stearate,
Yeah, I
a couple of layers of zinc stearate, and then your
Yeah.
parfum. But yeah, again, the thing we use in waxes as a release agent is that they do really linger. Right? Wax lingers, doesn't it? It stays around. And there's nothing worse than trying to stick a piece on that has still got residual wax on the inside. So you kind of want to try and choose materials and things like that so that you're able to make stuff with the least amount of release agents in them. Because fundamentally, like again, I've stuck pieces on. If I'm sticking stuff that I haven't made when it gets sent to me, and this is probably another thing that you should do, is clean the inside of your piece with glue thinner, right? That will remove any residual release agent and make sure that your piece stays stuck on really well.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
So do you use like Easy Flow or do you use just normal plaster molds?
For making my prosthetics?
Yeah.
It kind of depends. So I do a lot of work with flat molds, so they're all silicone.
Right.
If I'm making a contoured piece, right, so it fits over a face, 9 times out of 10, what I'll do is I'll make a fiberglass core, right, and a fiberglass jacket with a silicon matrix negative. So again, I just don't cast prosthetics out of a rigid negative.
Okay.
It's just more hassle than it's worth.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned. I'd rather put extra time in and make matrix molds because then I just know that I've got no problems. I end up with better edges, right? This may sound a little bit advanced, but if you're making matrix molds, if any of you have ever done that, right? And you make your matrix, your jacket, you close it, and then you pour your silicone into it. What you can do is before you close it, put spacers, even a layer of gaffer tape between those contact points on your jacket, right? Then when you pour your negative, it ends up a little bit thicker. Yeah. So then when you close it again, you've got a mechanical squeeze going on in your mold, in your matrix mold. So you just get fantastic edges. So I can make really crude, quick molds out of fiberglass, right? But with these compressed silicon negatives, so you just get good edges. And then I also make them in such a way so that I don't put cut plastic on the core.
Okay.
Basically, what do? I put lots of washing up liquid and Vaseline on the core, and then just cast it, right? And when it comes to opening it, I heat it up a little bit so it melts Vaseline, and the core just comes out, and I've basically got my prosthetic still in the silicon negative, and it's just raw gel, right? Then stuff gets really interesting because then you can start transferring it out of the mold like that. Raw gel straight on skin with silicon adhesive does not come off. It'll just stay on all day. So yeah, once you get into the point where you're playing around with all these different techniques and using some release agents in some places for some reasons, not using any or not using any cap plastic and other things, it's a big tangled web.
Yeah, step forward as well.
Yeah, you just start taking things to another level with that. Okay, let's do this one. Any other questions as we go forward?
So you've already applied glue to this piece?
So I've already applied glue to that, and it's mega sticky.
Yeah.
I mean, it will just stick to my finger, right?
Yeah.
But again, because of this hot glue frame, I'm not worried about it folding and glue sticking to itself.
Do you use Prosite to put on the silicon pieces?
No. Or yes, depends. I never put Prosade on directly onto skin. Why? Because it sticks too well and it's a bitch to remove. And I've been doing this so long now that I've removed so many makeups after 20 hours on set. Do you know what I mean? That I don't want that hassle, you know. And it's really unpleasant for the actor as well. Getting Prosade off skin is just unpleasant. So no. You know, what I'll sometimes do is I'll use Prosade on the back of the piece, you know. Especially where especially around eyes where you've got really thin transition, right? The Prosade, if you build it up thick enough, I mean, I don't know if you've ever stuck on Pro Bondo pieces, but there's something about the way that dried Prosade works on skin that is incredibly natural. So sometimes if I've got a piece where I've got a transition area under the eyes, very soft, it has to look very real, I'll essentially build it up quite thick with Prosade cream. Not straight Prosade, but the cream stuff. So essentially then kind of my edge of the piece is more like a Pro Bondo piece. Do you know what I mean? But then I'll use silicone adhesive on the skin because it's just easier to remove. So that's the short answer is like, yeah, but don't put it on directly on the skin. If I have to put it on the skin, I'll put a thinned out layer of silicone adhesive on the skin first, because then the makeup remover attacks the silicone adhesive. Right?
Yeah.
So you think ahead. So if you're ever doing Pax paint, do you guys know what Pax paint is? Yeah, so it's Prosade-based paint. Putting that directly onto the skin, killer to remove, right? You'll be there scrubbing for ages and ages and it'll just turn to like slimy snot and it's horrible, right? But put a layer of silicone adhesive down first and then put your Pax paint on top of that. Then when it comes to remove, it will stay on just as well. It actually stays on a little bit better, right? But then when it comes to removal, you're using, you know, the makeup removers that are specifically formulated to dissolve silicone adhesive, right? Prosade, you never fully dissolve it, you just turn it into snot. Whereas this, you break it down on a molecular level with a remover. So yeah, it's about layering stuff like that.
What if I take some pictures
Yeah,
of
sure,
that
sure.
first piece?
Any other questions? They're getting better.
What's your favourite polyurethane resin? Sorry.
F40.
F40.
F40, yeah. F40 and I think it's Neil's Materials one called FC.
54.
No, so it's not. It's the FCs. It's they're very basic fast cast resin.
Yeah.
They do like a couple of. I think there's one called 160 and another one called 180 or 190. The 160 is like really super thin, very white when it cures, and quite fast. Right, it's quite a fast resin. I use that a lot because again, I would just use different resins for different things, right? So I try to avoid making prosthetics molds out of straight up fast cast, just because ultimately it's quite weak and it's so susceptible to solvents. Right? So yeah, I'll use FC. I'll use like just basic fast cast. If I'm making a small mold, right, or like a whatever, right, a small closed mold, yeah, I'll make that in fast cast. Maybe if I'm only going to get 1 or 2 pulls out of it, but something like that. But yeah, the FC or the F40, which is like a dark blue one, that's really good. It's super, super hard. Yeah, that one. Put a bit more glue down actually.
So do you use prosthetic transfers?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my flat mold system that I've got that you can buy in shops and that they're kind of designed to be used as transfers, right? So it's designed to be made in a flat mold. I mean, this is another super easy, quick thing you can do is make a piece in a flat mold, trim all your excess cap plastic away while it's in the mold, right? Very carefully, and then glue the piece with the skin and just whack it straight on. Press it, peel it away. That's, I think, for certain things, that's totally the way to go. And then, yeah, then you can make them out of Pro Bondo or silicone, really. Yeah.
Do you put your cat plastic through the leather?
Yes. Yeah, totally. Yeah. I think I own 3 airbrushes, but the first one was probably the one that I bought when I was a student, so I don't think it gets a look in nowadays. So I've got 2. I've got my fancy one, right? This one. This is like a 400 quid airbrush, right? This is the Iwata, whatever, CH or something like that. Very fancy, super fine lines, are really nice for kind of painting and for doing makeup, but I would never spray cap plastic through this. Even though it's like 100% stainless steel, right? It's just so fine and cap plastic is just so aggressive. I wouldn't use that. So I use a Pache H. You can get it for 60 quid on Amazon or eBay, okay? And that's my workhorse. And it runs all day long. I clean it twice a day, just to keep it working. But
So you just keep that one airbrush for...
Just that one airbrush. And like I said, it's a cheap workhorse. And what's really good in it about that one, there's no moving parts inside, there's no needle, right? So it's gravity fed. So it's really easy to keep clean, basically, and just doesn't clog up. If you're spraying cap plastic through an airbrush with a needle in it, yeah, you're struggling. So if you're having problems spraying cap plastic, it could be to do with that, because those airbrushes don't like thick material. And if you're having to over thin your cap plastic just to get it through there, all sorts of other problems, right? Like I said, reticulation, it sounds like it's falling apart because you just haven't got enough material in there, Yeah. Cool.
What's the best thing to get an airbrush with if you're painting?
Dissolvent, whatever solvent it is. Again, which is why I like using acetone, right, base cap plastic, because it's just such an efficient cleaner. Just see that how I always check on my skin, see how much solvent I've got on my brush. Just to dab off any excess.
Do you apply the cat plastic to your sculpt first or after or both?
Sorry,
Does that
what?
make sense? So the cat plastic, when you're spraying it on,
Yeah, inside
put
and
some
out.
on
Yeah,
before, but do you put some on after as well?
yeah, I do. Again, it depends, right? So, like I said, if I'm going to transfer it on the skin, and I know I'm going to transfer it straight on, I might not put any cat plastic on the back.
Okay.
Right, so just raw gel,
Yeah.
because then I can put my silicone adhesive and some on the skin, and then I can just transfer it on. I mean, if you think of it like this, right, the silicone gel is very sticky, right? So the cat plastic is only really there just to help it keep its shape and stop it from sticking it into itself, right? Once you get that in your head, then you understand that you only need cat plastic on both sides if you're taking it out of the mold and you're going to be handling it, right? If you're never going to be taking it out of the mold, it's going straight on the skin, then you've got a bit more play as to where you need your cat plastic. So again, yeah, it just depends on what I'm doing. What I wouldn't recommend is doing it without cat plastic on the back and then powdering it. You get rid of the tack and then demolding it. That will eventually just stick to itself. Yeah. So, I'm not filling my edges, right? I'm not going around with like a filler paste and a spatula. If you're doing that, you've kind of got it wrong already, which goes back to the whole mold making thing. So again, when you're deciding what you're going to do for the project that we're working on, make good decisions. Yeah, choose your techniques wisely so as not to get yourself into trouble. This I see a lot of. Probably less so. I think things are getting better, but certainly a while back, I'd see third year work, right? That was huge, big, over ambitious stuff, right? And it's a pitfall, because you're going to spend ages trying to make this stuff, and it's going to be hard. Do you know what I mean? You're going to have big, heavy, clunky molds, big fiberglass molds that warp, that don't give you good edges and stuff like that. Whereas you can do really good subtle stuff with just flat molds and things like that and good design. Do you know what I mean? I did read through the thing, costume, whilst a good idea, is not part of your grading. Do you know what I mean? So don't invest in an over-ambitious design that needs a lot of fancy costume work because you're not going to get graded on it. Do you know what I mean? You will get graded on making good choices, right, as to your techniques that you choose to use and stuff like that.
Their first module of the year is their kind of go wild and explore. So hopefully they've got that all out of the way, and then for this one it's much more kind of
Totally.
Look,
The professional prosthetics world is all about subtlety. It's all about subtlety. You can come in with, and I'm not exaggerating. You can come in to an interview with a folio full of big, huge, ambitious, colourful monsters, right? With big fat edges everywhere, and then someone else will come in with an eye bag, one eye bag that's done really, really well. You can't see the edges. It looks really natural. It's painted well. It's not shiny. They get the job, hands down, straight away. And I've interviewed dozens and dozens of people and employed dozens of people now, and it's always the same. It's subtlety kills. I see this more like fine jewellery and watchmaking. It's like watchmaking, do you know what I mean? It's like really small, super accurate stuff. That's what will get you jobs.
Good quality, not quantity.
Absolutely, yeah. And we, me and my contemporaries, we talk about taste. We talk about taste. Who's got taste? Is it tastefully done? That's mega important.
So a lot of students have questions about good ways to approach getting their first jobs in industry. Have you got any advice?
I think if you're trying to get a job in this industry, I think first of all you just have to appreciate the gravity of that. You know what I mean? It's a pretty major life decision to dedicate yourself to doing this. So if you are going to do it and you're taking it seriously, then that's a good step forward. You know? If you have made that decision, then chances are you're already doing your own work, right? So if you're not doing your own work, forget about it. No one's going to give you a job under any circumstances, right? So if you're doing your own work and you're developing your skills, the best way that I think is just get out there. I mean, you've got social media. I didn't have that. I was literally knocking on people's doors with a portfolio and a rubber head in a rucksack. Do you know what I mean? Trying to get somewhere. You know? But you've got social media, and I know, like I said, a lot of the up and coming people I notice now on social media. And it's not to say that you should all be like really pushing. You know, there's people out there that I see that have got 200 followers and that just post workshop techie stuff, you know, but you see they're experimenting and you see that they're trying to solve problems. They're not doing Coke cans in their heads and zipper faces and what I call jam makeups, you know, crappy wound, loads of like blood paste all over it to hide the edge, you know. So what you should be doing is just developing your skills, developing relationships with people, right? Because ultimately that's what we would want this business to be about, right? It's not the City of London. This is about people. It's not about money and jobs necessarily, right? You work with people that you like to hang around with. So building relationships with people, asking questions. I mean, the people that get to work with me are the ones that don't hassle me for work. They just say, can you help me with the problem that I've got? Can you give me advice on how I can do this? Do you know what I mean? And that shows that they're interested, you know, and that they're interested in me for our craft that we share, not just where I can help advance them. You know? So if you take it with that approach of like, what can you give me? Can you give me work experience? Well, no. You know? So yeah, develop relationships with people. You know, are you worthy of being given a work experience placement? You know, prove it, and then if you can prove that, then you'll get places. You know, totally. But yeah, so you have to prove to yourself that you're capable, which is very important. Yeah. So step 2, prove to yourself that you're capable of it. You know what I mean? By working hard and investing in yourself. The time, materials, all that kind of stuff. You know, for me, it was my wife that, well, you know, my now wife that was my guinea pig for years. You know, so I was constantly practicing on her and doing life class and doing stuff. That's what you need to be doing. You know, so it's not. Yeah, if you want to get work, don't look for work. Basically, don't try and look for it because you might, and that's fine. You know, but it can be, and I will say this: it can be a bit of a mill. So big productions swallow youngsters up, chew them up, and out they go at the other end, a few years down the line, burnt out, and with no real skills, right? Because all you've really done is essentially like factory line work. Do you know what I mean? So you can make one mold one way, and only one way, but you've got no real creativity. Do you know what I mean? So invest in yourself, really, and then your skills. What I'm going to do, I'm going to get you to. So what I got her to do is I got Rosie to just dip her head down in the direction. When you're working with actors, and I get this all the time, people are like, it's like they move themselves towards you to somehow help you, right? But no, I mean, a default position is just completely default. No one, actors should not be like moving their head around to accommodate you. If you need to move them, you move them in a respectful way. So I just got Rosie, necks are really soft, right? And I don't want any weird crinkling. So what I got her to do is dip her head down that way a little bit so that the skin is a little bit compressed. Right? So that when I then, when she then returns to her default position, the piece is under tension. Right? So that's another thing with glue and prosthetics. You know, I was talking to someone about this the other day. You know, it's one thing to sculpt a prosthetic on a flat board or on a life cast. That's all fine, you know, but that's like a completely rigid, non-moving object, right? But I mean, you're gluing a prosthetic onto something that's not. It's totally alive and it responds to like the softness of the material or how thick the cap plastic is, you know, the tension and stuff like that. So it's all a really good idea to get into the habit of positioning your actors in certain ways. So like when I'm sticking eye bags on, I get them to look right up and I pull the skin down a little bit. And I get the eye, so when they return, the bag naturally forms in that way and things like that. You know, and the same things with eyes. Sometimes I get them to look up, look down, and and do this slightly, so I can get a bit more. So all that's really interesting. So yeah, what I'm getting at is that, you know, the piece that you make, whilst accuracy is really important, you know, and placement on skin is all really important. There's more to it than that. Yeah, there's more going on. Any question? Yeah, you asked me earlier on about transfers, didn't you?
Yeah.
What are you thinking of when you ask that question? Do you think
Like the, what's it called, the PTM,
PTM,
prosthetic transfer
yeah,
material.
Tinsley, Christian?
I bought some of that in the second year and I tried to make my own.
Are you doing that with like scraping it with the plastic and the freezer and then yeah. So that's really interesting, right? So what I was talking about earlier on about like the East Coast, West Coast thing, the West Coast being this mass production technique, right? So that thing with the paper, whilst being a genius idea, very, very good idea, used in the right context, actually quite a good technique as well. But that was invented in that context of Hollywood, of having to mass manufacture prosthetics, right? So if I've got my flat molds and I'm doing bondos, the best way to stick a bondo is transferring it straight out of the mold, right? Least amount of steps, most accurate, most best edges, and But if I want to run 20 pieces a day, right, in bondo, I need 20 molds, right? And they take ages to dry. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if I'm just doing like I normally do, 2 days of bondos, I'll make my bondos days in advance in the mold, and then I let them sit there and air dry in the mold, and then they go on and they're perfect, right? The Tinsley thing of freezing them, that's all just about being able to cycle your molds quickly. You know what I mean? So in one day, you can cycle your mold 5 times and get 5 pieces out of one mold. You know what I mean? So actually, that technique is more to do with the economics of manufacturing than whether or not it's a good idea. So in your context, it's probably not a good idea. Do you know what I mean? But he's a clever guy. He's sold it really well. But there's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of that. So another thing that me and my mates talk about a lot is the religion of effects. Right, where it's always become this, people deify processes. Do you know what I mean by that? So that you hear of something, you think, oh, that's the way it's done. That's the way it's done. Let's all do it that way. But you're not getting the bigger picture of the context in which it was developed, right?
It's always good to try different things and think outside the box instead of just doing.
Exactly, yeah. But you've got to understand who made the box to be able to get out of it and why they made it. Do you know what I mean? So in that context, yeah, it's.
I think when I made mine, because I wanted about 3 or 4 pieces to use, and just in case I needed an extra one.
Again, so in that context, yeah, great, because you can make quite a few in one day.
Yeah.
You know, for me, it's just I'd rather make 5 moulds than freeze 1 mould 5 times a day. You know, because then I get it all done in like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Scrape them all and then just leave them to dry. Another little tip that I do is, you know, when you buy electrical products and they come with this little sachet of silica gel, I dry my Bondos in a little tin, right, with a couple of sachets of that stuff in there, and it just dries the Bondo out quicker. Okay, cool. That is on. How are we doing for time? Everyone all right? Does anyone want a break now? Maybe 5-10 minutes? Break? Anyone need to use the loo?
Do you need a break?
No, I'm right. I can keep going. I'm all right.
Cup of slush.
No, I'm all right. I've still got that.
You can do everything.
So your background
Yeah. Now's a good time to have a look before paint goes on there, because then in theory, once the paint's on, you really can't see what's going on anymore. But you know, you can see that in most cases, there's always this like transition, right?
Sorry,
The bulk of the gel to the actual edge of the piece. Now, the edge of the piece is there, the bulk finish is there, but there's still bits of silicon that are almost really hard to see. So I find it really interesting to see the transition and be able to see how the translucency should work. Yeah.
I'm just going to get
Yeah. So I sort of say what you're saying, all of those transferable skills.
Sure. Just another one.
It was a jewellery. And we moved to the States in the 1930s. Right? That she started the way that we made Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all kinds of cosmetic. Yeah. I'll see you now. Don't waste money on the American stuff. Any British money, so you know, all basically anything that we buy that isn't it's all for the same.
So the
These ones are really close to you.
so good and it feels so good as well. Like it feels like it's on that like really nice
It's like just need all the details. Whoa. A whoa.
You made that so daisy.
I know. It's like literally just like fancy. You have a day too.
It's insane, isn't it?
But two of them literally. Yeah. It just progressed sort of
See something.
yeah, really good.
Yeah.
I was so worried this morning driving in. I was like, oh no. Yeah, winging it, but like, glad I made something sort of like small pieces.
Yeah, that's good. That's always a better way. Well, you don't like it. You love it. I love it. Just like yeah, I know. It's very interesting. You right, Rosie? Enjoyed it?
Yes. Nice.
That's quite relaxing.
Yeah.
It took you a breath.
Feels so nice. Feels good.
Yeah, I bet.
I mean, I use one.
Jen, got pictures?
Okay.
It feels so good. It feels like it's so nice.
Yeah, that's pretty good. The whole shelf just in different
It's
places.
like so many things.
You look like you sleep.
So,
It's good. You've got some
Quality that shit.
so you can go down the route saying, okay, this I'm letting water based. Because I want to be able to use shorts as
So good. Like this will freeze. We'll have it later on. You'll start a demo again and I'll go on the streets then.
It just looks like a cut on my face, doesn't it?
Yeah. Comes from
So good. Yeah, so well. Like it's literally like Fernando is such a good idea. Like it feels like good. I don't know if that makes sense. But like it doesn't feel like heavy or anything. It feels so like just
So much. And you're going to tell us to do so much in this one too.
She said,
It's like a nightmare. Well, what about major projects? What's that bit? Is that sort of as I mean, they've got better actually, and they've got better photos. Yeah, like my mom said, I said so.
So where it sticks is fun. So yeah,
I don't know if you just had that conversation. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it's just that to be fair.
Do you
I'm interested in someone's which is like, which is what I placed it, but obviously it's like,
I'm gonna do my.
What I've done is
be a good thing to do. Power thing's really the idea though, right? That's like I know, literally. Do you know what we're going to do? We're going to proper sand it down. We've just got to proper sand it down. We've got fiberglass over the lever as well. Just
I'll give you one of these
thin
for
layer.
college. So these are my flatmates. Yeah, this is
How do you
yeah.
get into like a contact with the company to say, oh, we'd like to make something?
No, I built a design.
We did that. We made you something. That's awesome. Did you design your own logo?
My neighbours.
Your logo? Very good.
We were like, how do we basically steal a Sangeet? How do we come up with a logo that makes sense?
Yeah. That's so true.
Yeah, but we well, the way that I see it is the Nazis basically stole the stuff from the UK. So the ninjas screwed it. There's like 9 different. So you start selling ready-made pieces. It's more.
Get loads of things.
Just actually. We bought the house kind of for didn't want anyone to she's super happy. She comes around, doesn't look at me. Yeah.
Is that a mug? It's a mug.
Oh my
From
gosh,
glass
Daisy
one.
is insane. Where's that from?
Homer. It's just glass.
Oh, it's like a tea in it.
Yeah, that's tea.
Candle.
That's so good.
They've got like loads of patterns, or you can just have like a plain clear one with black
You should
bends.
get one with sunflowers.
It didn't have sunflowers, so that's why I
If
got
I
that
get a fine one with sunflowers, I'm having this one.
Okay, we'll swap. We'll switch them. Okay, that's amazing. So happily swap with sunflowers. Find that.
It's such a good idea.
You
Yeah,
find so many
nice little
good things
gift.
in Brighton, and I'm like, where are you shopping?
I am a bit of a fan of it. But then we've got a really good one in Wales. It's a Trosh in Trosh. It's massive. This was in the Trosh one, though, in the home section.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Be a little.
We got like good winter. Yeah.
We got skirts. Skirts.
But it keeps the heat on there. And like, yeah, and that's like obviously and then it cleans really well. Because you know like how bamboo ones are staying and everything. Like, you know, they're better and it's yeah, it really does keep your hands warm. So it's really nice.
He's like massive. You could do that. I haven't done this shit.
Yeah.
You started out getting like little bits and pieces.
Yeah, a little
And you
bit.
built up like.
Cool. So this is my kit, what, 20 years down the line. So there's nothing in here that is older than 3 years old. Right? So my kit has evolved a hell of a lot. Yeah, totally. So it's airbrush, compressor. In my workshop though, I still use my original compressor that I bought 20 years ago. Right? So none of the kit that you're investing in now will go to waste. Right? Like everything, like, you know, in my workshop there's so much kit and stuff. I've got sculpting tools, I've got tripods, turntables, I mean all the basic stuff and stuff I've still got. Now I've got 500 pound turntable, you know what I mean? And like all the bells and whistles, but I still use my original.
We literally bought so much kit version. Yeah. We're like, whenever we use this stuff, we get like cinemax that we got, and like, we get mastics, this kind of thing. Mastics are different weeks now.
Yeah, you know, but even like I've got, you know, these are like 90 quid.
Oh, I don't know.
I've got
They're probably all
I've got over 30. Maybe. It's crazy. But, you know, and I use these as a gift.
I've tried to buy my mom.
But you can still buy it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's dashboard.
The worst.
It's cheap. It's 30. It's not high,
I don't think anything's stable.
but it's doable.
Yeah, like for instance, it's flashing as well. You use silicone, if you flashing, silicone is expensive. I've noticed, but the fact you use a hot glue gun is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful.
So there's so many little things like that. And again, I'll show you just techniques. So I'm going to do some blood work now.
Yes, sweet. I'll sit down for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll try.
Okay, so let's start painting, right? So third years, you've all done like alcohol-based painting, right? Any of like the other groups done alcohol-based painting? No. Yeah. It's really cool stuff. Essentially, this is basically watercolors, right? So watercolors, but they dissolve in alcohol instead of water. They're essentially acrylic-based, right? And you know, there's lots of different brands and different qualities and stuff like that, but essentially they all do and work in the same way. Let's get this. So, right, ways of we've got the airbrush. I don't think this needs airbrushing. I'm just going to do very basic kind of natural skin tone. But if you're doing zombies or monsters or veiny type things, you know, dog's bollocks really. You know, you can do so much with that, and it's super quick. So if I'm doing a big veiny zombie, I won't sit there with a brush and do it because it just doesn't look right either. It doesn't have the right feel, right? It looks too sharp. Whereas this is perfect because it kind of fades out and it looks more natural. So we've got that, and then I've got my a flicky brush here, right? Now, you can use an old toothbrush for this technique as well, right? And that involves essentially kind of flicking paint like that, right? Which we'll be doing a bit of. And then I've got my stipple brushes. So I don't know if you can see this. Oh, this is not good. No, all right, it's 30 seconds back. So these brushes, when you wet them slightly, the ends all go into little points. I don't know if you can see that, right? So that basically allows me to paint with this pointillism technique. And I'm assuming you know what pointillism is, right? Beautiful art technique, beautiful painting technique, and really useful. So I'm just going to paint with that. So just to give you an idea of the kind of how diluted our work. So essentially what I'll do when I'm painting a piece like this, there's essentially 3 tones that I'm working with: reds, blues, and yellows. Right? You have 3 primary colours. Yeah. So I always start with the reds. Now that's the level of dilution that you want. Super, super thin, you know. If it looks like acrylic paint, then you've just got way too much, right? So it's better to work with very, very, very soft. And if I get this right, I'll do my pattern. Can you see that? You get a really nice, delicate pointillism thing, and that's what I'm going to be working with. I do check my hand, do paint in my hand to see what it's going to be looking like. Now, what I also find is like the younger the skin is, the rosier this colour is, and then as they get older, they get more kind of purpley, cooler and purple, right? So I'll have a slightly different red if I'm doing an old age makeup. So there's kind of like 2 stages to, well, 3 stages really, to painting, right? First of all, I'm just trying to get a good basic skin tone match on the prosthetic itself. So I'm not painting the skin. I'm very specifically not letting any paint or colour get on the skin at all. This dries really quickly. See? It dries, just keep topping it up. So yeah, no paint on the skin, and just very loosely trying to match.
To colour your silicone pieces, did you use like a pigment or did you just use flock?
No, this has got pigment. Yeah. So this is Neil's Materials Pale Flesh, right? And lots of white as well, because it's not pale enough. And then for judging my translucency, right, when I'm mixing my pigments in there, I don't know if you've come across this technique, but I use obviously a wooden mixing stick, and I draw a little black dot on the end of my stick. So as I'm mixing, I can check the translucency of my material. And the way that I figure it in my head is at 3 millimeters thickness of silicone, right? I just almost don't want to be able to see the black dot, right? So I've essentially got 3 millimeters of light penetration, right? Which is kind of like what skin does. Skin is translucent, light passes through it, right? Not bouncing straight off the surface, which is how you can tell bad makeup, right? Because it just bounces straight off. That's what corrective makeup does deliberately, yeah? With prosthetics, you're doing the opposite. You're trying to make it look as translucent as you can, right? Anymore, so if you do your mixy dippy stick thing, and at that 3 millimeters, you can still see that black dot. It's too translucent, Right? Now, if you're doing like thin pieces, really thin pieces, like kind of like these almost, erring on the side of translucent is a good thing, right? Because it's gonna just blend off into the skin a bit more naturally, and some of the natural skin tone is going to come through, and that all helps, right? But if you're doing a nose or ears and it's too translucent, it glows, right? It looks too thin, and light bounces off it and it looks fake. So yeah, sometimes we'll look at, especially horror films. Watch horror films where they've got really stark lighting, and you can spot bad makeup because they glow under the lighting.
So when you use the airbrush to put the paint on, do you just dilute that paint and then put it into?
Essentially, yeah. I mean, this is why I like this airbrush in particular, because the cup on it is on the top and it's quite stable, right? And I'll literally just have one of these brushes. I've got a pipette in my makeup kit, so I always have disposable plastic pipettes. Just a bit of clean alcohol goes into my cup, and then I just mix it straight in my cup, And when you're airbrushing through these, by definition, hopefully you're using such little paint that you can kind of very quickly mix up all the colour that you need for that particular thing, and off you go. Yeah, and I'll just work as this is my palette, dipping, and working like that, and then airbrush straight on. Yeah. So that's what I mean. These alcohol palettes are really good for prosthetics. They're really great because they're super versatile. And between these techniques, right, 3 techniques, airbrush, stipple brush, and a flicky brush, you can get really good effects. So that's our. Here's my palette off. Here's my reds. I'm going to go some ochres now. Actually, no, I'm going with blues.
When you're pre-painting prosthetics, what's your technique for that?
Oh, yeah, good call. It's almost like when I pre-paint prosthetics, obviously if you can, it's just better because you've got more time to put detail into it and things like that, Sometimes, but then the juxtaposition by that is, you put a raw prosthetic on someone's face and suddenly the fact that they're alive gives it life. So then sometimes you can do, I've stuck on old age prosthetics, like an old age makeup, and painted it in 15 minutes. And it looked amazing. I could never pre-paint pieces in 15 minutes to look that good. So there's just 2 different things going on there. I don't really know what it is. But if I pre-paint, like I said, if I'm pre-painting silicone prosthetics, I'll put a bit of IPA cap plastic, tiny amount, maybe like a 1/20th cap plastic into my alcohol, right? And use that with my skin illustrators, so that when I paint my prosthetics, the paint bonds onto it, right? So yeah, that's a really good technique to use to make sure that your paint doesn't rub off. Doing that. But yeah, I'll tend to.
Do you seal it afterwards with that?
Yeah, I'll seal it with more cap plastic. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just enough to make sure that I'm not going to destroy my edges. What I'll sometimes do is I'll pin the piece down onto something and then just use little bits of tissue to just overlap the edge itself. So I'm painting again the bulk of the piece, but I leave the edge untouched. Yeah. Blues do a lot. Blues are mega important. Yeah, so what I tend to do when I'm pre-painting pieces is I kind of have a bit of a routine now. So I tend to mix up this colour. I find this colour really interesting and it's quite unique on everyone. If you stretch your palm out and look at the colour of the inside of the crease of your hand, that's what I call your crease colour, right? And that crease colour is all over your body, but it's quite unique to you. So what I tend to do first when I'm pre-painting is mix up that crease colour that I want, right? And I'll just go in and I'll start defining the shapes of my sculpt or piece or whatever it is, you know. So obviously I'll go in and just every little thing with a very little wash, and straight away that starts bringing this very homogeneous surface to life, right? And then I might go in with flicks or with this kind of stuff, and it just depends. So I did some monsters the other day, some kind of creature guys, and again, yeah, so I did all my crease colours first, and then I just went in with an airbrush and did very bold, veiny skin pattern in a blue and a red, and then went in and detailed with this, and then very broad, big flicks, just for more like skin mottling, and that was done. Right? Yeah, but if it's an old age piece, it might be a little more subtle. Yeah, pre-painting old age pieces is dangerous because it's all about subtlety in that context, right? So I'm just going to step. Yeah, so another thing that I normally carry my kit, I didn't lay it out to these. I buy these from any chemist, right? They're incontinence pads, right? But these, seriously, these are the best thing to use as towels and stuff like that when you're doing a makeup. So these are dirt cheap, like 10p each. So I normally use this as my table surface, right? Which is really good because as I'm painting, I can dab away excess. At the moment, I'm using this tablecloth, but you know, I just do that to dab away the excess. Come and look up. You know, again, if you can really obviously see all these like dots, you're probably going too heavy, right? So another thing is, right, I know all these palettes tend to come with a black in them, but almost never use black on makeup. So I'm going to go with some ochres.
Where did you get that thing from?
This?
Yeah.
Oh, these, like any art store. I'm guessing the art store downstairs might even sell them.
What is it?
It's just it's called a waxed paper paint palette, tearaway palette. I mean, I buy them on tear-off palettes. They're the ones for like oils, basically. So not the ones for water, but they're for aqua colours because I think they kind of the alcohol dissolves, you know, just attacks it. But you know, another reason that I'm not a fan of the flicking thing is that even within Rosie's face, there's quite a few different colours going on in different places, right? It's not just homogeneous. There's a bit of blue and there's a bit of red and there's a bit of yellow everywhere. You know, cheekbones get more sunlight, yeah, so they tend to be more yellow because they've just got more melatonin in them, right? Whereas, like, kind of shadier bits, especially around here, it tends to be quite blue because you've got a lot of veins and the skin is so thin that it's just a bit more translucent. So by blocking my colour scheme, my colour pattern out this way, so now I'm starting to mix colours, right? So up until now, I've been like very specific as to like what's what colour. But now I've just mixed in some blue with the reds to just give me a bit more of a purpley tone. Yeah, and now I can actually start bringing paint out onto the skin as well to start kind of tying it all together.
If you're painting foam, do you use packs?
So again, the thing with packs is it's just such a bitch to remove. You know, so horrible to kind of work with and messy and sticky and just heavy. You know, so if I'm working with foam, what I tend to do is basically my base color I put down in packs.
Yeah.
And then that's it, right? So I essentially put a base color down and seal everything. You know, whether it be skin to foam or whatever. Yeah. Seal all that with packs and then paint it with skin illustrators.
Okay.
Yeah. So all my kind of tonal values and all the color work comes from the skin illustrator, or alcohol palette, sorry. But yeah, the base tone is down in packs just because it's got that opacity to make everything one surface. So it's a kind of blank canvas material. Yeah. So I just see packs as a primer, essentially. You know, like when we were doing, when we've covered tattoos in the past, and you know, we've gone down with Pax paint first. That would be the case, right? So you basically use Pax paint to cover the tattoos and, you know, give you a base color, and then all the detailing and freckling and all that kind of stuff is done in alcohol, just because it's just easier. I mean, yeah, you can thin Pax out and start flicking it around, but it's heavy, right? It's got all this prosade in it and sticky, and you know, you can't clean it off surfaces and all that kind of stuff.
So you covered up Tom Hardy's tattoo.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of quite big tattoos and a lot of kind of not very good skin, you know, lots of spots from all the bodybuilding supplements, you know, in inverted commas. So yeah, now I can actually start blending outwards, right? Well, you can now go in with it. Can you guys see?
Yeah, perfect.
So I'm going kind of some freckly type colours now.
If you were trying to create like a bruised effect, would you use the IPA paints or would you use a bruising oil?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Depends where it is, really. I mean, last night, that's one thing that I was like hunting through my kit for, and I just couldn't find my bruise wheel because I did want to turn this more into a more kind of beaten up thing. So I thought, yeah, I can do some bruise wheels. And in that case, I definitely would have done it because I wanted to go around her eye. So no, I wouldn't necessarily do a bruise around someone's eye with skin illustrator, you know, with alcohol paints on its own, just because the amount of solvents near someone's eye.
Mixed together too.
Yeah, you could do. Yeah. But yeah, you know, you can. I mean, I've got all my bruise colours here. Just depends. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, it's one of those things. 9 times out of 10, I just do it with alcohol paints, though. Yeah. You know, again, this is why I like to use these palettes, especially if you're, you know, if you're just doing a one-off makeup, that's one thing. But if you're doing the same makeup over and over and over again, there's suddenly you've just got all your colours there. Do you know what I mean? And this page is freckle colours, and that page is that type of colour. And there's often been times where, you know, I've started a makeup on a job, but then I've got to hand it over to someone else, and you've got a perfect record of all the colours. You can date it, you know. All sorts, so it's really good. So what I like to do now, right, is then essentially start picking out elements that are already on Rose's skin, so that I can then co-opt. Does that make sense? Right.
Yeah.
So I can co-opt some of like the marks on her skin, accentuate them, and bring that kind of colour back into my piece, and just suddenly it just starts kind of making more sense again. And the thing goes, I can normally that freckly type colour is what will work well as a flicky. So I'll show you the flicking. With flicking, I dilute it even more. Let's see if we can see this. So the kind of pattern that you get is like that. Right. So it's kind of nice because it's very random. You get different sized spots and that, which is good. But I mean, if you're trying to be very specific, so if I was to basically just do that straight onto the skin with the piece put on it, you can see that transition. If I just start flicking everywhere, I'm getting just as much colour on her skin as I am on the piece. So it's never really going to truly balance out, right? Just everything is going to push in one direction. So I'm very specific with my brush first, right? Slipping, putting colour down on the piece. Now I can start blending it out, right? And putting more colour in the whole thing. Close your eyes for me, please. And what I like to do at this point is also then kind of finish it essentially with a natural pale skin tone. Again, if any one of these drops is like immediately obvious to you, then I've kind of messed it up. So now I've kind of got it matched, right, to the skin tone. Yeah. Now I can start going in with bruisey type colours, right, just to give it some more interest. But yeah, so if there's any stages to it, I'll always do that. Is like match the piece first, don't touch the skin, then combine everything, you know, and then details, then dynamics, right? Yeah, of course. Yeah, if you all want to come up close and have a look, now's the time.
Yeah, no.
So then there's something else that actually is good that I mentioned this now. Right? There's almost, you can either paint to that human eye or you paint to camera, right? What I find generally is that cameras are kind of less discerning than the human eye, right? So whenever I paint something like this, it's deliberately pointillistic, deliberately so, because I know that when the camera sees that, the camera sees deeper through the silicone and things get softened out. So chances are, if I look at that in that webcam, if anything, it actually still looks a little bit pale. Yeah.
When you do work for film and TV, do you do work then through the camera?
Yeah, I mean, like you get a hang for it, so you know kind of what to do.
Yes.
But if it's really like important, you know, it's like an old age makeup,
Yeah.
I'll finish, but I make it very, very clear to everyone that no one shoots on it until I've seen it through. Then I'll put it in front of the camera, under the lighting, and check it on the monitor. So that's your qualifying checks.
Yeah.
Just intuition. Best way. Right. Lifting it right up from the boobs and get the shadow.
I watched them females paint job on at IMAX.
Oh, yeah.
I was amazed how careful she was.
Was she?
She took such a long time over the
I
paint job.
didn't miss that. I would love to see that.
Yeah, it was really nice to see actually, just the pace.
What did she do? Was it one of the last ones?
Just like go palettes and stuff, but she'd apply a bit of paint and then she'd stand back and just
Stand back and have a look.
really look and then come back to it and then come in again. So seeing people like Christian and paint so fast.
A bit too fast.
You like your brushes?
Yeah.
Do they come in like
Sets.
like a set?
Yeah.
Do you recommend like a set?
Okay.
No, I recommend choosing the ones that you think you need
Yeah.
and sticking to those.
Okay.
I buy the sets just because he brings a new set out. So basically, I buy the new set
Yeah.
to find out which brushes in that set I like because it's a bit better value.
Yeah.
And then I'll buy repeats of the ones that I actually.
What is the European body art?
Yeah. Neil Gage.
Oh, okay. And they've got the replaceable palette. I bought a few palettes for the just one colour. I like the dash brightness.
I find them a little bit chalky.
Yeah. I like the price.
But this is what I was saying. It's like, you know, if I'm doing when I do creatures and monsters, then yeah, I use dash brightness because I can use them in bulk and chuck them on, and it's great. If I'm doing very fine work, I'll stick to my really nice ones because they're just ultimately better quality. There's less filler, that's the biggest problem with this, with the cheap alcohol paints. Is the amount of filler that they've got in them.
Yeah, sure.
That makes them too opaque and too chalky looking. Yeah, this is a very subtle bruising.
Do you have a background in hair work at all?
No, none whatsoever. No, all the wig work that I've ever done is just blagging my way through it, really. You know, it's one of those things that I'd like to learn more about wigs. Because like I said, I've just never had a day of training in it. It's just all been learning on the job. And, you know, working next to like makeup designers and stuff like that, that really do get wigs and stuff. So it makes it, you know, you learn from them. But, you know, if I've got to stick a mustache on or some eyebrows or even a wig for an old age makeup that I'm doing, then I'm invested in it and But I'm not going to try and get a job on a period show just to do wigs. Like that's not my thing, you know. So like, you know, wig work and hair work is important, but it's not the be all and end all for a prosthetics artist, you know. 9 times out of 10 on big sets and that, there's just people there to do that. That's what they do, you know. So, you know, whilst I say having a diverse skill set is good, ultimately what you want to do is have a niche, you know. That niche can be a combination of different things. Do you know what I mean? So it's not like saying you have to specialize. That's not what I'm saying. Because if you over specialize, you're kind of screwed as well. But it's about finding your niche, you know, with whatever combination of things suits you. Apologise, please.
Have you ever like been rushed for time and stuff on set? Like you were so close to finishing something and suddenly they're like, time to hurry up, let's go, we've got to shoot. And you're like, I haven't even stopped on yet.
So what I tend to do in that instance, as soon as I open the door, I've got my stopwatch on the table and I stop the clock. I say, how can I help? And they're like, oh, I won't interrupt you anymore, sorry. So I'm very specific. If I say I'm going to take an hour and a half, don't mess with me up until 1 hour and 20 minutes later, 29 minutes later. You know? So my usual response is just like close the door on your way out, you know, check your schedule, you know, things like that. Okay, so right, oh no, I'm going to do some more. But yeah, no, the pressure's always there. The pressure's totally always there as to like finish on time and.
Has it happened though to you? Like,
What, where they've
someone
pulled
coming
someone out? Well, I'll give you, I was in a situation very recently where we spent a long time doing this makeup. And it was just one, you know, it was a guy wearing a big wraparound stomach piece with only a tiny little stab wound, you know, but he had a blood rig and a thing to hold a fake knife in there and stuff like that, right? So there's quite a lot going on, big piece, lots to paint. You know, he's going to be, the camera's there on him, so it has to look good, right? And the associate producer, or whatever he wanted to call himself, was kind of bothering me, and you know, like I'd made it clear how long I was going to take, you know, and I've been doing this long enough to know that crews also take longer than they're going to say. So I'm under no real stress. I'm in my zone, you know. And this guy just kept coming in, and I had to stop working and I had to say to him, look, guys, like, you know, this production has paid thousands of pounds just for this, right? If they have to wait an extra 5 minutes, it's not going to kill the budget, you know, but you bothering me is going to ruin this effect.
And they're so
You know, and he did. You've got it, you know. Yeah, so now I'm just kind of I like to put this kind of yellowy, fleshy orange colour down as fat. There's like a kind of fat colour, even though it's not that realistic, it just suddenly just makes the inside of the wound a bit more prominent.
Are the actors usually like quite easy to work with?
Yeah, 9 times out of 10, actors are fine. Actors are great. They're not the ones that cause problems. It's assistant directors and producers and department heads. You know, they're the ones with something to prove. Do you know what I mean? And a job to protect. You know, a job title to protect. Actors are cool. I mean, they're there. You know, they're there already. No one's going to fire an actor. Do you know what I mean? They've got nothing to prove. Or I have seen actors getting fired though for being dick. Yeah. I saw an actor who was just such a dick, and everyone hated him. We're all on location, and everyone hated him. Everyone had a problem with this guy, and the producers must have known, must have seen. Do you know what I mean? They wrote him out there and then. They wrote him out, and he's gone 3 days later. He's a big star. He's been a James Bond villain and everything. You know, he's gone.
Name which one?
It's going back a while actually, so it's not that obvious. I'm not going to give it away.
Obviously, if they're a dick to you, can you just be like, you know?
Yeah, again, like very rarely has an actor actually out and out been a dick. You know, the worst that can happen is that they're just completely disinterested. You know, so I've been in a situation where you're trying to put quite a complex old age makeup on a guy, and he's got his headphones and his iPad and he's reading the fucking news, you know? And it's like, dude, like we're both thousands of miles away from home, you know, I've got my job to do, I'll be finished in an hour, you know? But whilst you're, again, all with respect, and like I said, good bedside manner is important, but when an actor is in my chair, I'm doing the work. Do you know what I mean? And it's not to treat them like a model. I'm doing it in order to be able to help them. But when they're in my chair, it's my chair. Yeah.
You prefer them not to sit on their phone?
No phones, no headphones. No, this is all about your actor engaging with you. Do you know what I mean? Because it's a collaborative process. And if they're not engaged with it, then I'm never happy. I've never been happy with a makeup where I haven't been able to connect with the person I'm putting it on, you know. And the other day, I was on the day of the election, and I'm not going to go into politics, but I was doing a makeup on a idiot, absolute moron. You know, I just didn't have it in me to finish it properly. You know? And the production were all like, "Oh, it looks amazing, it looks fantastic." And I was like, "Yeah, great." You know? But deep down, I was like, I didn't take a picture of him or anything. You know what I mean? That all happened on a subconscious level. I didn't consciously say, "Well, screw you, I'm not going to make you look great." Do you know what I mean? It couldn't be asked. Couldn't be asked. Yeah. Okay, so I'm kind of happy with colour work, right? And I'm gonna maybe put some matting agent on it, but not yet. It doesn't need a lot. I just briefly wanted to go over now bloods, really, and what can be done with bloods.
There's one.
Yeah, that's the one. Great, thank you. So I've brought 3 different types of bloods with me. I am going to plug this brand because it was my buddy. So this is Rob Smith blood. It's really good. He makes really good like liquid and flowable bloods and stuff like that. But his drying bloods are not so great, right? Now, I'm a huge fan of drying bloods. They work on a completely different system to this. This is essentially sugar syrup and dyes, right? And this is something else. This is more like alcohol paint, right? It's thick, it's gloopy, but it's got alcohol in it, and this will dry, bone dry, right? So it looks like dry blood. Now, I see this a lot, again, in amateur work, right? Where you do some trauma stuff, and you've got loads of blood everywhere, loads of jam or stiff. I mean, we all know that doesn't happen, right, in real life, so just don't even go there. But secondly, blood dries really quickly on the skin. like really, really quickly. So unless you're taking a photograph of a wound that's meant to be 5 seconds old, having lots of fresh, wet, shiny blood all over it just don't look realistic. So always go with dry bloods. Now, I've got 2 different tones. I've got a light and a dark for the same reason, right? That the older it is, the darker it goes. So you'll see what happens now. So that's my fresh. This is my Tom. Now, this starts getting a bit messy. So what I'm going to be doing basically is a combination of using dry bloods and wet bloods. Right? So I'm going to use my alcohol-based dry bloods first to just make it look smeared, right? And then I'll go in with the wet bloods to kind of make it look juicy in places and stuff like that. But the idea is that at the end of it, it'll all be dry. It'll be a little bit of wet blood, but you can wear that all day long and take jackets on and off and not worry about getting sticky blood everywhere. So that's really important. I do have some like clotted blood paste, right? But again, you'll see I'll keep this to an absolute minimum. And if anything, I'll use it at the end just as a little flourish, right? So what am I going to apply this blood with? So this is something I'm going to show you that I'm very into. So what I'm going to do, now I know this looks a little bit random, hopefully this will work. This is interesting. So I'm just going to put this down. Close your eyes. So what I want to do, I like to kind of wet this out.
Is that just water?
Yeah, that's just straight up water. Now I'm essentially thinning out. What I want to do is I want it to kind of all get in there and get into like the creases and all the texture of her skin. So where's that going to dry out? Yeah, so this is where you start getting kind of creative and interesting with blood, rather than just like smearing it on. It can be an artistic medium, you know? To see how you get these like very natural looking, not even drops, kind of drops just kind of smeared. And how natural this kind of look. Okay, cool. So now I can go in with some of the lighter blood.
Is this drying blood as well?
Yeah. So this is like the lighter colour now. And, you know, what's nice is because we've got this thing of like the waterproof alcohol paints, you know, but because this is the blood is alcohol based, but because it's still kind of liquid and water soluble, it just runs in this very natural way. You know, most wounds don't just bleed blood, right? You get plasma coming out as well, and other things, right, which dilute the blood. So blood just does like really interesting things, including like this. I mean, I don't know if any of you have got tattoos, but when you tattoo, you know, you get tattooed, you get a lot of plasma coming out, this clear liquid, you know, which creates this very thinned out blood look. So yeah, never use blood as is straight out of the bottle. You know? I don't think it's meant for that. You know what I mean? I grew up in a Catholic family, Spanish Catholics, very deeply religious. So there's all this iconography around Jesus on the cross. And the Spanish was really, you know, they're good sculptors. And in like the post-Renaissance period, they made really beautiful, hyper-realistic sculptures out of wood, but then they were layered in layers of plaster and oil paint. So they look like waxworks, right? And they had the most amazing blood work on them. Beautiful blood paintings, you know what I mean? And that is like, oh, it's so beautiful. You know? It's not about just covering it, that just kills the effect. Places. Okay, and then just to finish, right, we can go with a little bit of the more traditional. So I'm taking this off. Cool. Cool. So I think now that I've done that, I can see that I want a little bit more contrast going on around here. So cool, done. Yeah, so you see that, just a bit of flicking is useful for like just quick corrections and stuff like that. Yeah.
Sorry.
Just like hanging off.
Yeah, like I said, it looks
Want to take a picture of your face?
Go on, Laura, get in there.
Get in there, girl. Just look good from the moment you put the
like I
first
said, the
bit
brand
in there.
and really expensive. Yeah, they're great. They're great. Pretty much. Yeah, oh yeah, especially doing very quick, you know, when you're doing movie stuff, it's like
That's right.
Keep it on. I want to keep it on forever. I'm gonna walk around like it.
Oh, that was so good.
Send it to Ollie like, oh my god, look crazy. You'd be like, who did that then?
So what was your favourite part?
doing that. Just getting to that. Cool.
Did you get pictures of this?
Yeah.
I thought because the episode was all set up,
Yeah.
So I saw Doug right after. I just said, Doug, that was a really funny joke. And he was like, what do you mean? He was like, that joke about Einstein, they like, it's not meant to be a joke. And we both got confused and were like, oh, I sort of made me realise that he didn't do that. And then they went back and they changed it. That's it. That was pretty much my best bit. That was my best bit. Cool. Do you want to keep it on flash?
I love it. Yeah, it's fantastic. Just keep it on.
Let's keep it on.
Yeah, why not?
Onto the place.
It's awesome. So good.
Do you want it off? Right. Who's really eager? You're eager to help me remove it?
Yeah.
Come on, Jen.
I have a question though.
Yeah.
So many today. Glycerin. However you say it. Would you use that to make it shinier?
Why would I want to make
I
it
don't
shiny?
know. I
Why
just
would you
because
want to?
you know burns and things. Like
Burns, yeah.
burns,
Burns I can get, yeah.
But for this you wouldn't. No. Okay.
She might sweat a little bit, but I mean that would be
Would you use glycerin
No, I
to do
wouldn't
that? You would
use
use
glycerin.
completely
No.
different.
I would use like a makeup shine.
Oh,
You know, so I've got one in here and like here. Just like a very big gloss. So I might use that, dilute it with alcohol and stick it. You know. Again, why? It's going to dry. And it's not going to smell. So the continuity is the problem. But honestly, there's nothing more annoying than junior makeup artists every single little microsecond they can. Doing that, it's the worst thing
But
possible.
then that's also a question, like continuity.
Yeah.
You just don't know, I think that you just go, whoa, like that. Someone, if they had to do that again, would they have to learn how you did it, or get the same sort of people who are doing it for TV?
Again, this is where design. When you were doing it, if that worked for her, you say, well, she's done wear this for 40 days. Suddenly it's designed because being, how do we? So what? But what I would do, maybe if I had to do that for 30 days, is do some of this blood painting as a tattoo transfer. So I design it first in Photoshop, right? We'll learn, and there comes a time where you get a knack so fucking quickly. And you think, why on earth would I want to do that? But yeah, I'll just map that out, put it in, and then just do a little bit of blood on top for dressing. But you do that. Like I've done really traumatic wound stuff where it's part of continuity.
I was going to say, like,
Yeah.
they asked you to recreate something like, okay, well, I need pictures, I need notes, I need to know how you do it. So if they have tattoo stuff, that's obviously much easier to do because
But that again, that's a design decision, and that's like an internal industry thing. And again, one of your, I looked through your brief, and one of it says is like, using appropriate processes and techniques and problem solving. So that's just it. That same makeup can be approached so many different ways, and you choose which one based on that one context. So what's the deal? Okay? There's so many variables. Where are you filming? Are you filming in the UK, close to your base, or are you like miles away, somewhere where you can't have that access? But then you look at some stuff like Lost. One of those TV shows, Lost. Really big TV show, early 2000s. Yeah, Paintbrush in a weird desert island. There's one of the very latest series. There's a scene with a woman, she's falling down some kind of well shaft. It's got lots of blood there. And they must have shot it on 7 different days. And it's because she just keeps cutting, and she's always like trapped under this thing. Makeup just constantly changes because they hadn't taken that into account. Bad makeup design. It looked very realistic, so it's a good makeup, right? But in terms of production design, badly designed because they couldn't recreate continuity. So yeah, you design all of that. That's all part of the brief. That's all part of the brief.
Put a sign-up sheet down there.
So,
Is blood stain?
no, this is another reason why I don't like using
When you go to speak,
bloods that they stay, whereas drying bloods, not to do that, come off in that trace. So I do have liquid remover as a brush.
I'm just gonna start scrubbing her face.
Yeah, yeah. So
Is there
basically
a
start.
technical way of
Well, what I
changing
would do is just basically start scrubbing off anything that is juice. Just give the whole thing. Maybe I should. I doubt the piece will come off.
Yeah, please, yeah.
Can you just skip them out?
I'll put a print out sheet.
Yeah.
I've got a model coming at 2, so it might be a bit earlier if that's okay. So
Sign up sheet.
I don't know what that question is. You said you did that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna watch you work.
No, I didn't do work experience. I actually like most of the
Oh, right, okay.
Your wig was sick down. I'm gonna like swap. When it was we don't just put a thing on for today. Yeah. And then I think Sangeet just got a solid swap. I think she's got.
Oh, he's gonna do it.
He's doing it.
Oh, so he's put the time slot down, so. Oh, that's right, and that's okay, because I thought we had to run down there, like, oh, quickly get a time slot.
I mean, like,
What sort of thing do you say?
Have you got things to do all day?
do you want my opinion?
Or you can just came in for this?
She's designed.
So you
Don't worry about it.
After one,
I know, honestly.
your wig was insane.
Oh my god, did you put a light in it?
Yeah. So insane. So good. So good.
It's supposed to have lights all over the place.
So they've got
So good,
photos
man.
of
What are you thinking for this one?
Pretty sure.
Yeah.
one
Pictures.
Yeah.
Keep trying to watch.
So don't put anything
Yeah.
Everyone actually goes to the shop.
Honestly,
Yeah, because it says it's with you.
I watched the fact you're gonna go, what's going on? She's got like Scarlett Johansson in it, but she,
You want to make
yeah, well, if you don't mind, don't watch it, because honestly, it's a waste of time.
Just for the
I'd
effects.
say it's machine is probably better,
nice.
but honestly, I wouldn't. I think you should keep this one.
So look good. That was so good. Is that just to work? I still haven't worked out how long it exactly.
Yeah, me really, I don't do that.
But I'm just.
When you come in,
So, yes,
I was like, got some little bits,
Sometimes
so you're
they-
getting involved with chubby little fingers.
Yeah,
I
good
can't
work.
detect stuff that they'll do. I get really impatient and I can't my head up. And if I mess up a line, I start getting to work.
Yeah, this is what it looks like. And check my Instagram.
Is she like off the call with the
Super zoomed in.
Yeah. With the cat plastic, when you're putting it onto your vaccine plastic, what ratio do you use it in the spray?
So if again, I generally use IPA. Acid. You use IPA.
Well, I only use IPA recently because I had to apply something to a bowl cap, so it's like,
You do
no, yeah. So that's the only reason why I use that, but.
If you're using regular acetone stuff and you're buying it ready diluted, it's already running. 6.5 times alcohol, so 1.5 of that cat plastic. Yeah, so 6.5.
This is acetone. You also have to use 6.5.
That's what you use.
Yeah, we've got that.
Yeah, I used it on my pizza.
Yeah, I know, super. Yeah. Yeah, it's because like there's another thing. I know it's complex. Yeah. So you have to thin it out a lot so that it doesn't profit. By the time you thin it out with that much alcohol, Correct. And you can measure, so it's a bit silly. So if you want to do it, I would cut it 50-50 and then do your best. So that it doesn't have any more parts.
Is that like the things you get in KFC?
So
Yeah, there's little lemon wipes. I don't think they do the same thing. Probably not.
It feels so weird. I'm going over your like, and I'm like, ooh, you've got a hole in your face.
It really comes from a pig.
Yeah.
Does it?
What's there to eat around?
Is it?
Well, I'm sorry.
I hate vegetarians, right? That's so random. Especially farmers.
See that one there? Caroline Fact, Wits Love Island.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Who's
Who's
been arrested?
Who what?
Caroline Flack's been arrested.
Adele, do you watch Love Island?
Yeah,
Do you? Are you serious?
Yeah, we love it.
You're coming round the flat and we're watching Winter Island.
Yeah, she basically assaulted her husband and she got arrested for assault. And she's like been arrested. And so she's meant to do Winter Love Island. And obviously now she's had to quit. So I don't know who's doing that. They think it's Laura. But I don't know because it's when she's doing Dance on Ice.
Yeah, she's dancing on ice.
So I don't know who it is.
It might be Keith Lemon, not Keith
He's my friend.
Keith Lemon, I worked with him.
Did you?
Was he alright?
What's his show called? Pro Selector.
Really.
Yeah. He was alright.
Celebrity Goose.
He was a
He's
nice
so
guy.
weird, isn't he?
Because he stayed in cancer. I don't know if you remember, he wore like, what was the character's name in Pro Selector?
Craig David one.
No, the one where he's wearing
No, that's
a neck brace.
oh,
When he wasn't in the
Yeah.
mask, he had like this weird Russian accent and he wore a neck brace. Right?
yeah.
So he wore the neck brace the whole day. Right? And when he took it off, he was like, and his producer had like a crate full of different neck braces for him. So very strange.
You watch Celebrity News.
No. I stopped watching TV about
But you're into films,
yeah.
like cinema.
Yeah.
You go to Blockbuster and stuff.
Yeah.
You walk to the red carpet and stuff.
Oh, well, that's no.
Yeah, like when you're doing films, like you
No,
get invited, don't you?
You do, but you tend to go to the cruise screen, which is nothing like red carpet screen. No, it tends to be like a 30 on a Sunday morning or something, because it's the only time, it's the cheapest time for them to rent a cinema. No, they probably won't.
No, it's a shame. There are cinemas that good. You've had to watch it.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing I'm like worried about. Like, is I think I get really nervous applying stuff
Yeah.
to actors.
Mm.
But then I suppose once you're used to it, you just
Especially like we get with the bowl caps and obviously you have baby hairs and stuff and you're sticking it to the back of the neck, kind of ripping it off. And obviously that's the only, and you're using like an oil remover or something, but still it hurts your baby hairs.
yeah.
If you did it to an actor, you'd be like, oh, I'm so sorry. You're missing one or two baby hairs, but it's fine.
No, but, well, I mean, I guess if you just shave them, right?
You
So,
show you exactly.
if
You're
I
like,
was
you're
doing
going
a
bold, right?
If I was doing a ball, anyone, woman included, those baby hairs would go there.
Yeah, exactly. No, fair enough.
I guess the actors are just
You actually
Like I
used
said,
to it, aren't
you actually-
they?
you know, there's a two-way thing.
They're
about
so
that.
used to it.
Sorry?
Are you serious? You actually do shave it off?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Do they let you? Or you just do it as easy?
I feel like it's
Well, I
part of
make
the
it clear
thing
that
as
it's in
well,
their
yeah.
interest.
Oh yeah. You're going to have some baby hairs and it's going to hurt.
So, well, it's not only going to hurt, it's the fact that it'll look shit.
Yeah,
If I don't
yeah.
shave them off and they'll get in the way and they'll look shit. Do you want to look shit?
Do you want to look shit?
I suppose if it's like big stars, they're getting paid shitloads of money.
Like I said, 9 times out of 10, the big stars are fine.
Yeah.
You know, the big stars only get to be, I think, only big stars because fundamentally they're quite cool people and
Yeah.
easy to get on with them.
I suppose they're
People
willing
like
to
them
do
and they
it.
don't cause problems.
No.
Because there's some actors that are really quite well known that are also known for being problems, right? And you can just tell because they come out, they do 3 or 4 films, and then everything after that is slightly straight to DVD or not
Right.
as big profile, and you wonder why. That's why.
I suppose some actors
Because
like
no
really
one- no
like,
one-
you know, they lose weight or put on weight, don't they, for their roles and stuff. So they're like really into it.
Oh yeah, they're trying hard for us. So.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So if I like was ever to work with anyone like Brad Pitt all the time, I'd be like,
Let me just ask you about fiberglass mould then.
Sorry?
So if you say you made something and then you fiberglass moulded it, obviously it's got all that texture from your like sculpting it.
Yeah.
So would you go over that with sandpaper still, just so that your cat plastic wouldn't get stuck?
Well, but what's the point in sculpting all that texture? If
I
you
know.
don't- No.
Will it still
no,
like
no,
get,
no, no,
will it
no.
still like get stuck to it then? Because of the texture you have and it's not.
There's like, I don't know how you're doing your texture. There's certainly a good technique to like texturing clay so that you still end up with a surface that's quite stable.
Yeah.
But still, some people, make their texture is not very good. So then they end up with a mold that's just crappy. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can still make something that's got really good, realistic, strong skin texture, but that isn't so rough that things want to grab. Do you know what I mean? But like I said, I just don't think that. If you're spraying super baldies, or if you're spraying IPA-based cat plastic, then suddenly fiberglass mold's not so bad. Like I said, my gut says it's more to do with the release agents that you're using than anything else, and then also like the solution that you're using your cat plastic. Again, if it's too thick or too thin, you think you're spraying the right amount, but you're not.
Yeah, you can't tell either.
Yeah, it works well, doesn't it? Yeah. On the screen as well. So a little bit of timeline. Hey, Sangeet, this is Matt.
Yeah,
He's
Matt
our
Cox,
head
curriculum manager
nice
for the
to meet you.
area. Yeah, just to say, thanks very much for coming
my
down and
pleasure.
spending the time to, kind of pass on your knowledge. It's so valuable. So,
Yeah,
and I appreciate time. It's,
We all depend on
Hectic.
people.
Yeah.
Inspire us, don't we?
yeah. So, and I think, so far it's all been brilliant. So, thanks very much. And, I'm sure they've learned a lot. And then hopefully, we'll see the results in what they do.
Thanks.
Pressure's on.
I think, Andy, grab you some lunch and coffee or whatever you need. All right. Thanks very much. Cheers.
Oh, it was amazing. I feel no sticky, no oily.
Well, next year, January.
So good, man. Good, man. Beef. Beef.
You're right.
You're all done. Here's an extra one. Do you want to keep
It's
these?
literally behind it as well. Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Let's see.
I'm just going to stick on all of
Someone's
them.
on.
What the heck is that, Rosie?
Oh,
No.
Yeah.
You were talking about like it's better to use more small pieces,
Yes.
big things. What would you say is best when applying quite big chest or neck pieces? Because they obviously think about a lot. Recently just done. It was it was quite a big piece, and then I just like something. Separate now to flat paint.
All of the face and
Yeah.
one piece.
Yeah, which I didn't want to do because I didn't want to look like a mask and then yeah. But
There's a struggle, because we don't have any fix to fix it. Fix it with.
Yeah. So I was just wondering, if it was any neck piece or.
I do lots of necks, I'll see a big wrap around necks. Now that is a little bit more quiet. Shows pictures.
That's next, isn't it? One of your things, isn't it? Sorry?
Yeah, I've done quite a few. Old age necks.
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, you talk time that.
I'll show you next. I did a neck with quite a small, still quite a smallish.
Yeah, I think what you think. Just something like that. She was like, yeah, I know. And I was like, I think, my friend came back home. one of them, but they're, overly, like, ours, you know what I mean? And like, we just.
Yeah.
So.